Malcolm McLaren and his life partner and fashion collaborator Vivienne Westwood were transitioning their business in London from a teddy boy shop called Let It Rock into a fetish fashion place called Sex. He arrived in the United States in January of 1975 to sell some of Vivienne Westwood's new fashion designs for their fashion shop Sex in New York City and to pay a visit to the New York Dolls. He knew Syl Sylvain and Johnny Thunders ever since they owned a fashion boutique back in the late 60s called Truth and Soul. But when he saw them, they were a mess and the band was on the verge of breaking up. Johnny Thunders and Jerry Nolan had developed a severe heroin addiction, and Arthur Kane was an alcoholic. Malcolm decided to act as the band's manager, or as David Johansen would call him, their haberdasher. He put the ailing band members into rehab and rented a rehearsal space for them. After a few weeks, the band was jamming and practicing together, but he felt that they needed a new gimmick, so he took the band members' measurements and sent them to Vivienne Westwood, who created some outfits to go with their new image. Malcolm was always fascinated by the imagery and artwork of the communist China and decided to make the dolls into a faux red guard with some inspiration from one of their new songs called Red Patent Leather. The band got their new outfits and decided to showcase their new gimmick with 3 shows at the Little Hippodrome. They played the shows with a small venue draped in red tablecloths, red party favors, red lights, a giant homemade communist flag as a backdrop, along with communist worker songs playing in the background before the band took the stage. As David Johansen would call it, it's not a communist party, it's a communist party. It went over like a lead balloon. Rumors spread it around that the New York Dolls turned communist. A fan walked up to Johnny Thunders and asked him if he was a commie. He replied, "Yeah? You want to do something about it?" Despite turning commie, they played 3 more shows at the Little Hippodrome, but Arthur Kane and Jerry Nolan missed a couple of the shows due to substance issues and were replaced by Peter Jordan and Spider from the band Pure Hell. The Dolls played 2 shows in New Jersey on March 12th and 13th at the New Bell with their rhythm section still on the sideline, so Spider and Jordan took over their spots as replacements. Around this time, Malcolm was organizing a tour of Florida, but before they headed off to the Sunshine State, they would play 3 shows in South Carolina on March 27th through the 29th. It was there they realized that the communist gimmick was dead. Syl Sylvain said this about the gimmick: "Let's face it, in America you could be gay, commit incest, do anything, but you cannot be a communist." It was a goof. Even in New York, that thing would have been much bigger without that flag. They would have killed us in the South with that flag. It was a shock just seeing us with red pants and tight jeans with a hole in your ass or an earring. No one knew. All these things have implications that the lowest common denominator didn't know. They didn't understand that shit. The New York Dolls began their tour of Florida, which would be the last one that the classic lineup of the Dolls would partake in. They played their first show on March 31st at the April Fool's Party at Dante's Den in Briny Breezes. The Dolls were scheduled to play in several small clubs along the Florida coast. To save money, the band would stay at Jerry Nolan's mother's house. She, along with her husband, owned a motel, which was a bunch of old mobile home trailers converted into sleeping quarters. They would go to and from their gigs in a rented station wagon, which was driven by their roadie. Syl Sylvain, describing the Florida tour: "We were bumming in our fatigue, staying in funky places. We didn't even make good money, but we ate okay, and we're doing what we're supposed to do, getting our shit together after so many years of abuse." Arthur Kane was flown in to rejoin the band as they headed off to play a show at the Flying Machine on Dana Beach in Fort Lauderdale. This would be the last show that David Johansen would perform with Jerry Nolan's and Johnny Thunders. Malcolm was trying his best to keep all 5 members together, but with Nolan and Thunders getting junk sick and going through withdrawals because they couldn't get any heroin, along with David Johansen's drinking, brought them to a breaking point. One night, when the band was eating dinner that Jerry's mother prepared for them, a drunk David went off on the band and told them how every one of them was replaceable. The junk-sick duo of Thunders and Nolan finally had enough of Johansen, tired of the humid weather and poor conditions, along with the inability to get drugs, quit right then and there and headed back to New York City to get a fix and start their own band. Syl Sylvain said about the incident: "We were at Nolan's mother's house, and Johansen was getting lushy drunk. He was an abusive drunk. He'd tell you that you didn't matter and that he was the singer and he could go on his own without your hang-ups and bullshit. Basically, he said that to us one day, and after dinner, and Johnny and Jerry, after they heard they could be replaced again and again, walked out, and I rode with him to the airport. David Johansen said this about the breakup. I don't remember the exact chain of events, but we were down in Florida at a Bates Motel place that Jerry's mother owned. There were these old trailers that they would use as hotel rooms, and we were going to base ourselves there and go off and gig all the time. The band broke up because a lot of these guys, they couldn't function without junk, so it just got impossible to do. You know, big rock stars have nurses and gophers, but we never had that shit. These guys wanted to be like Bela Lugosi. The Dolls had 3 more shows to do, so they brought in a teenage guitarist named Blackie Guzman and a drummer. They played the final 3 shows and went their separate ways. David Johansen would fly back to New York City. Arthur Kane and Blackie would form their own band, while Sil Sylvain and Malcolm McLaren would take the station wagon and tour the Deep South before ending up in New Orleans, a place both guys were looking forward to visiting. Johnny Thunders and Jerry Nolan would arrive in New York City to let everyone know that the New York Dolls were dead, and they formed their own band, the Heartbreakers. I hope you have enjoyed this episode of Cuppy's Music Curios. My name is Cuppy, and I hope to see you soon. Cheerio!